Oh, you damn right. Recruiting never stops, even when Texas is about to play Ohio State. Let's get you the recruiting hour. That's Jason Sukamel. I'm Chad Hastings. We're brought to you by Longhorn Wealth Management Group. Jason will jump right in with a massive name. Hopefully, people are learning the name Kennedy Brown, offensive tackle stud in the 2027 class. You had an update on him and a prediction on him this week in the 3-2-1. Let's start right there because there's nobody bigger, figuratively or literally, in this class, correct?
Yeah, I mean, he's the number one player in the country, regardless of position in the Rivals industry rankings. So, I mean, where better to start than Kennedy Brown? So, in truth be told, I didn't have much of an update because I talked to Kennedy a few weeks ago, but I've been picking up little bits and pieces of information on Kennedy Brown. So my prediction in my 3-2-1 column, 3 things we learned, 2 questions, 1 prediction. My 1 prediction, I'm predicting Texas to land Kennedy Brown. Land a commitment from him at some point. He's pretty open, Kennedy is, at this stage, but I mean, he also is pretty open saying, hey, yeah, Texas is a strong contender for him. He thought about going to this Texas Ohio State game. He's not planning on being there. I think he's going to the Clemson LSU game after all. But I just think the things I hear from Kennedy Brown in talking to him, the way he talks about Texas and the camaraderie and the people at Texas and being an in-state school, I think Texas is in a very strong position, Chad, but also maybe I'm jinxing Texas because I think I said this about Felix Ojo and before, but like Texas can't afford to not sign Kennedy Brown, right? And I know people behind the scenes, they feel that same way, right? People who are much more important than me in this decision, they feel that same way. So, in those, when Texas absolutely has to get a guy like Tyler Atkinson, and I think it's an absolute need, Derek Cooper, they are able to go out and close those deals. That's what I'm expecting with Kennedy Brown to eventually happen. We're a long way from him making a decision, though.
Yeah, so let me walk through this, Jason, make sure I have the logic from like the fan perspective, but from what you're saying, maybe from the team perspective. If you had to have Fasusi and you didn't get him, and then because you didn't get him, you had to have Ojo. Now, if you compound it and Ojo does end up at Tech and not with you, now is this you have to have Kennedy Brown, underline it, because you're not getting those other 2?
Yeah, probably so. But you remember there was a time we were also saying they had to land John Turntine, right? Before it was Felix Ojo. So, I mean,
quite a consolation prize.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like Texas is without offensive line talent. I mean, Brandon Baker's still a young player. So, but yes, I think the number one player in the country at a need position from the Houston area, Texas better roll up its sleeves and find a way to make that one work. I think it will in the long run, but it's a pretty early prediction to make any bold statements on where Kennedy Brown will commit. But there's not a team I would put above Texas at this very early stage of his recruitment.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it really does kind of pile up. It's not only it's all 3 guys that we just mentioned. All 3 are in-state guys, but it almost feels like each of them, the talent level is so high. But to Fasusi, all due respect to Fasusi and Ojo, neither was the number 1 player in their whole class.
Yeah, which me, I'm a big Mike Fasusi guy. Like, if Fasusi would have been number 1, I'd have been like, okay, I get it. He's that good. I think he's that good. But Kennedy Brown right now, and again, these rankings will change, but right now he is he's on a different level. He's a number 1 overall player in the class. I remember I saw him at the Under Armour camp. These camps all blend together this spring, and he looked like the number 1 player. The dude was dominant. Just a fantastic player. So, and I'm looking back at my notes when I talked to him a little bit, a few weeks ago. He said, whatever place will develop him, offensive line play, whatever school prepares me for the next level, he said will be important in his decision. I mean, Texas has got a pretty good track record. Kelvin Banks, if Trevor Gooseby goes out and does what we think, boy, what as good as Kelvin Banks was, right? Kelvin Banks was a 5-star type player. If you take Trevor Gooseby and turn him into a potential first-round pick, then Kyle Flood says, hey, you talk about development, big guy. look what I did. Trevor Gooseby was a 3-star, and look what we did with him. So imagine what we can do with you. So yeah, I think that certainly helps Texas's cause. He's big on academics. I mean, Kennedy Brown is. He's not a guy that just talks about it. He actually is big on academics. I think that helps Texas too. The pieces of this just seem to line up for me, Chad. Thus, the prediction that Texas will get a commitment from Kennedy Brown at some point.
It's a big time prediction. Check it out and a lot more in the 321 column. There's your QR code for orangebloods.com. Get signed up. We are debuting as we do on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. If you're listening in that 10 a.m. hour, thank you for that. Whenever you're checking it out, the game is a little bit closer or further away, but we're right on the doorstep of Texas and Ohio State. So get signed up for orangebloods.com. Jason, before we leave the discussion, since I mentioned Ojo's name, I know you got a question this week in the 321 about, hey, are there guys out there that Texas is not going to stop recruiting and things like that? So when it comes to some of those massive names, Ojo, Malachi Lee, Jamarion Carlton's a guy that I still have my eye on, even though he's committed to Baylor. Like those type of names, I'm assuming Texas doesn't lose the number. They're going to keep the relationship going and give it a shot for December.
Yeah, that's one thing. And I mentioned that in the answer in that 321 column. I mean, this Texas staff is really good about that. When a guy commits, for the most part, they stay in touch with those guys. They continue to recruit them. Like you said, crazy things can happen, man. Coaches can leave. NIL deals can get blown up for whatever reason, potentially. So, yeah, they'll stay in touch. I remember when Felix Ojo, it was before he actually announced for Tech, but when we learned a few days before that he was going to announce for Texas Tech, I remember talking to some sources, and they're like, hey, we'll see. We'll hang around. We'll see what happens like in December with that one. So, yeah, Felix Ojo, Carlton, Malachi Lee, the big offensive lineman out of Hawaii. Absolutely, Texas will stay in touch with those guys and others, and just you never know how things can turn at the last minute in recruiting.
Yeah, keep an eye open for all of that. Obviously, how certain teams play on the field can sometimes affect the way a recruit thinks about it. The visits, when do you visit? Do you go to this home game or that home game? We'll keep an eye on all of that as things move through. It is the Recruiting Hour, brought to you by Longhorn Wealth Management Group. Let's give you some info on John and his crew. John is excited because this is his first Longhorn football season as the official sponsor for the Recruiting Hour. And to celebrate, John wants to offer all OB Live fans the opportunity to take advantage of that free 90-minute private consultation we've been talking about. Learn how working with a certified financial planner like John, along with his Longhorn Wealth team, can help you maximize your wealth, minimize your taxes, and ensure your legacy. LonghornWealth.net, or you can call 972-707-4900. John and his crew, Longhorns through and through. His wife is a UT grad. So are his 6 siblings. So you never have to worry in the Donovan family who they're rooting for when Texas plays football. Thanks to John for his great support of the recruiting show. Jason, in terms of this game, we get a little closer to Texas and Ohio State. You sent me a little note. I thought it was a great idea to kind of remind people about a couple names that we've talked about that are new guys. I guess they'd be in the 25 class that are getting started here that could, play in this game, and we could see them. So let's throw a couple of these names out. I think the first one, I guess Brandon Baker, right, would be the first guy that we really need to talk about because he is definitely going to play football on Saturday.
Yeah, Baker, Ohio State was one of his finalists. Nebraska was in there. He took an official visit to Ohio State. I believe Georgia was in there as well. Obviously, Texas, of course. So, Ohio State and Texas, it's funny. Like, they recruit a lot of the same players because they're recruiting the top players in the country. But in terms of, like, really being active in head-to-head recruitments, there aren't a ton of them, maybe 1 or 2 a year, but it's always the biggest of the big guys, right? In Brandon Baker, a 5-star offensive lineman, Ohio State made a strong run at him. Obviously, Texas gets him. Now he's a starting right tackle for Texas. Julian Sayin, we've talked about on this show. If Arch Manning isn't at Texas, Julian Sayin's probably wearing the icy whites this weekend for Texas in Columbus. So, Julian, there's a couple others we can talk about. Yeah, but Brandon Baker, Ohio State was very much a player in his recruitment. He took an official visit there. Texas went out, and now he'll be starting for the Longhorns on Saturday instead of starting for Ohio State, possibly.
since we started with an offensive lineman before we move to a skill guy, let's stay on the line because we obviously know Hero Canoe is a name that can be brought up. That was, I wouldn't call that, obviously that's not a recruiting battle, but it was a transfer guy from Ohio State. I'm really interested to see how impactful he can be, Jason, because there have been some good reports out of, camp. It's not like Hero Canoe's been invisible since he got to Texas.
Yeah. It's interesting. I talked to an Ohio State source in getting some notes for my matchups piece, which I'll release like on Thursday of this week. But he said, hey, Ohio State would have loved to have kept Hero Canoe. Maybe not because he was a dominant game breaker type player for them, but they don't have a lot of depth at interior defensive line. They needed Hero Canoe to stay, but he just, wanted to transfer. He's obviously at Texas now. We have heard his name come up in fall camp and doing some good things. My only question there, Chad, they've got so many defensive tackles. But Kenny Baker said at the media availability when the assistant coach was there, he goes, hey, I'd love to have my guys get like 40 snaps apiece and play a lot of them. Okay. So are they going to do that and play, 5 or 6 defensive tackles and have a deep rotation like that? Or maybe 1 or 2 guys going to kind of step up and be like, okay, that guy's really, upped his game. We're going to give him, 60 snaps, 55, 60 snaps. I don't know, but I feel pretty confident, certainly in week 1, Hero Canoe will be a part of that rotation for Texas at defensive tackle.
And on the back to the offensive side, another guy who's gotten some great reports here and there through camp on the freshman side has been Dalen McCutcheon. That's a guy that I feel like might end up, maybe it's not against Ohio State, but I feel like he's making some plays certainly in September when the games get a little easier and they get a chance to get some guys in. But who knows, Jason? Maybe we see him make a play in Columbus.
Yeah, you feel like that's a guy where Texas got really good value. I mean, he was a highly regarded recruit, but everybody is so focused on Jamie French and Khaleke Lockett. Maybe Dalen didn't get the attention he deserved, but he's had a really good camp, and Ohio State wanted him. He did take an official visit there. Now he ended up committing to Florida State. So, and then he obviously flipped from Florida State to Texas. So, but Ohio State was a factor in his recruitment. They brought him in for a visit. And listen, if Ohio State brings a receiver and Brian Hartline brings him in for a visit, especially a receiver from the state of Texas, you better take notice because those they know what they're doing at the receiver position. So, Dalen McCutcheon was another guy that, Ohio State was a strong consideration for him. Ultimately commits to Florida State, flips and signs with Texas. And, will we see him on the field on Saturday, Chad? It's a good question. It wouldn't shock me, but I think you're right. If not Saturday, I think certainly week 2 we do.
Yeah, and I also wonder, Jason, does part of his decision end up being maybe, like, let's say he really kind of dug the Ohio State idea because of the receivers they've been pumping out. Room's kind of full, though. I mean, you got Smith coming back. You got Tate. Ennis is on his way up, moving up into a different position. I wonder if McCutcheon is thinking, hey, I'm going to go be a part of the freshman group at Texas, and I think I got a better chance to make an early impact. I wonder if that was a part of, his decision-making.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thinking back into my conversations, she just had a real comfort level with the Texas coaches, and Florida State kind of went off the rails there for that 1 year while he was a recruit, and pretty much their entire class bailed on them. So I think Texas just did a good job kind of gaining his trust and his family's trust. But I think Dalen, like knowing what I know about Dalen, he is kind of a silent assassin, if you will. He's very quiet, very super polite and respectful, but I've talked about him before, dude. I saw him at the Rivals 5-star. He's against the best players in the country, and that dude wasn't intimidated, and he went out there and backed it up and produced. So I don't know that competition would have scared him away from like the receiver room at Ohio State. I think it was more about relationships, being close to home, that type of thing that helped Texas.
Well, I'll mention Diabell's name, even though we probably don't see Diabell in Columbus. This will be his chance to soak up the atmosphere and everything. But he is a guy Ohio State would have certainly taken. And Jason, before we switch sides, another guy the Longhorns ended up with that the Buckeyes probably would have liked to have had is Alan Clark. We should probably mention him one more time before the game kicks off, because that is one that was described by a former Ohio State player as a steal that Texas got. So we're going to see right away maybe how his impact on the defensive line looks in a big road game.
Yeah, that was a big win for Texas to get Alan Clark. The edge coach has already done really good things in Austin. So, and Ohio State's won there. Listen, you can go back. I mean, Garrett Wilson, Baron Browning, J.K. Dobbins. I mean, Texas and Ohio State, like I said, Riley Pettijohn just last year, who's probably
Yep.
going to play in this game. Devin Sanchez. But again, they don't necessarily – it's not Texas and Texas A&M or Texas and OU where they're going head-to-head like for 10 guys in every single year. But, like, when it's Texas and Ohio State, especially when Ohio State gets them, it usually ends up being a really badass player. So, I said this on Almar's show on Tuesday. I was like, but that's where you want to be, right? If you're Texas, if you're recruiting against Ohio State head-to-head, that means you're recruiting elite players. Those are the guys you're going to go head-to-head with when you're going against Ohio State. So it's an interesting kind of history there. Ohio State's they've done a good job over the years coming into the state of Texas, being fairly selective, but the guys they take out of Texas and sometimes away from the University of Texas are usually really good players, and we'll see a few of them on the field on Saturday.
Yeah, Jason, you mentioned Pettijohn and Sanchez. Like, my guess would be, and I haven't followed it super closely, my guess is they're not on the field Saturday, because if they were, what would that say about the Ohio State defense? Are you immediately like, are they that good? Are they plugging in that quickly? But those are obviously two guys Texas would have loved to have had both. Ohio State ends up with both. Pettijohn at the linebacker spot. Sanchez is just a badass shutdown corner, correct?
Corner, yeah. He can probably do. He's got the length to probably do whatever he wants, but I think we'll see him at corner. And in Pettijohn, like the early camp reports were that he might play, so we might see Pettijohn. Now the difference is if he ends up going to Texas instead of Ohio State. I don't know if he's starting right now, right? Texas has, some talent there, but he's definitely playing in this game. If he's in Austin right now, I think he's a day one contributor. So
maybe Pettijohn does play. And then the other thing, Jason, as we round out this discussion, I think this tight end battle in this game is going to be wild because both these teams wanted Max Clare. So I think the number one player maybe in this game that we know will have an impact that both teams wanted was Clare. He's at Ohio State. But then Texas does feel good about Jack injuries. How those two guys perform, those two stat lines, I'm not saying it tells the whole story, but those two stat lines will be interesting to compare in this game. Do they both impact game one? I'm interested to find out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kind of forgot about that. And we talked about Julian Sayin and how those dominoes fell, and he ends up not going to Texas, goes to Alabama, winds up at Ohio State. Well, same, Texas targeted Max Clare in the transfer portal. He ends up going to Ohio State. So then Texas goes out and gets Jack Endries in the spring portal window. And, I don't know. I'm not sure Texas didn't get the better of that deal, but we'll have a pretty good idea of that. That's going to be fascinating to watch on Saturday. I say that, who knows, Max Clare may go out and catch 100 yards worth of passes on Saturday. But I think, Texas feels pretty happy with what they've got in Jack Endries. But yeah, another interesting one where they kind of went head to head and the dominoes fell in different directions. And we'll have an idea on Saturday of who got the better end of that bargain.
Yeah, don't forget those tight ends. They always say it's a quarterback's best friend. And if you're a quarterback that's making your first start or maybe your third start with only like 90 attempts, might be good to have a best friend, especially if the second guy's on the road with all that crowd screaming at him. So the tight ends could be really important in this game. We will talk, get some Q&A, some questions that came in to Jason this week that he threw into the 321 article. We will get to that. Let me tell you about Longhorn Wealth Management Group again. We've got John's prediction coming right now with Longhorn Wealth Management Group. I told you he's a Longhorn fan through and through. He's up in the Dallas area. First, it was the Dallas Texas Exes chapter. Now he's a part of the Collin County Texas Exes chapter. So if you want to be a part of it, we've told you to email John. Check this out. He's encouraging all Longhorn fans in the Collin County area. Come join the Texas Exes Collin County chapter, the official watch party for Texas Ohio State. It is Saturday at Dirty Birds in Plano. If you can't remember that, I can't help you. Dirty Birds in Plano. Call or email John for all the details. Here's John's prediction. He likes Texas 23-13. He likes an 11-1 regular season and an SEC championship. Oh, look at this. He's getting nerdy. The defense gets 48 sacks in 12 regular season games, and he's also predicting OB Live fans will benefit from that free 90-minute private consultation. So check them out. 972-707-4900 or go to longhornwealth.net. Talk to them about how a certified financial planner can help you maximize your wealth, minimize your taxes, and ensure your legacy. 11-1. I feel like I've heard that record. more and more as people are predicting.
I actually made my prediction in my 3-2-1, and I did not go 11-1. I'll just say that. Go read it in the 3-2-1.
I saw what you did, Jason. How dare you? How dare you go so crazy in your prediction? Go check that out at orangebloods.com. I'll throw that QR code up so you can go check out Jason's prediction, the prediction on the team, the prediction game by game, wins and losses, but also that big bold prediction on Kennedy Brown and some other stuff. You'll also see the Q&As that we will go through here in a second. Real quick, though, Jason, I thought it would be good to clarify for people because you and I were trying to understand it. You found the information for us. But this weekend is the end of August, beginning of September, technically, and there's supposed to be like a dead period going on. But don't worry, folks, the NCAA is going to help with recruiting. And, Jason, the way I'm reading this rule is starting 48 hours before kick and rolling all the way through 48 hours after it's over, you can have recruits in on campus and you know, the home teams, like we always know, they get that love. So back to our previous show, when you talked about Derek Cooper going to the Miami Notre Dame game, that is going to be allowed as long as he's in that window of time around the game.
Yeah. So the dead period was all of July and basically all of August. But if you have a home game this weekend on, let's say, Saturday, then I guess starting Thursday would not be a dead period.
Yeah.
And then the 48 hours after, which is weird because that carries us into September 1, which is when the dead period lifts anyways. But long story short, it is a dead period. So like Ohio State can have recruits on campus at the game this week. But Texas could not have recruits on campus on Sunday per se, or Thursday or whatever. So it has to be, but Ohio State has that luxury. If you have a home game, you can do it. But then September 1, the dead
free
period.
For all.
Yeah, it's a free for all. You can have all the players you want on campus whenever you want them. So.
One thing I wonder, Jason, is that a reason we're starting to see more true home games and these big time matchups in this window? You've got Clemson with a true home, Florida State's hosting Bama, obviously Ohio State's hosting Texas, and Clemson and LSU. I wonder, because it clearly states in the rule that it has to be the game has to be played at your home field or a stadium that is used as your home field, like Arkansas uses Little Rock. You can't do this in Atlanta.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work in Atlanta or Charlotte or an NFL stadium. So I like the specificity of that because maybe it pushes those teams towards, hey, let's do this as a true home game. And then, and they talk to each other and say, hey, next year, LSU, we'll come see you and you get to have it next year. We'll take it this year as Clemson. I'm hoping that's what's going on.
I haven't thought of it like that, but there are more home games than neutral field games. But, even during the season, like when Texas and Oklahoma play in Dallas, I mean, Texas is the home team. They can invite recruits to the game, give them tickets, but there can be no face-to-face contact between the coaches and players. So even when it's not a dead period, those neutral site games really aren't great recruiting tools other than the kid gets to see a game in a cool atmosphere. But, you don't get to interact with those guys. So, it's a good question. I don't know the answer. I don't think that would be why these teams are doing home and home. It's probably more about making, I'm sure dollars trumps everything else. It's probably about making more money for having a home game. But it's an added advantage for a team like Clemson, obviously having a home game this weekend. And Kennedy Brown, who, by the way, I think is going to be at that Clemson LSU game. And I'm sure I haven't seen a visitor list for Ohio State. I need to kind of scour the internet, see if I can find that. But I'm sure Ohio State's going to have a bunch of recruits at the game on Saturday.
Yeah. Jason, don't break my heart. Every other year, I believe Steve Sarkisian has a corn dog with recruits at the state fair. You're telling me that's not happening? Come on.
Well, he'd be breaking some rules if it did. But, I remember the one year is way back when, but when Texas, literally right when they left the stadium, they were on the bus, the coaches were FaceTiming all these kids. Did you see that? Did you see that ass kicking we just put on?
Yeah, right.
And now I'm not even sure if you're allowed to do that. I think the NCAA got wise to some of these loopholes that you can't do face to face. But hey, Chad, we could have this kind of conversation where we're doing it online. So that's how that works.
How many times do you think Sark and his coaching staffs have said 83-3 when talking about that matchup with recruits lately? All right, we got some Q&A that Jason received to wrap it up right after Lisa tells you about specs.
Texans know for selection and lower prices, it all starts at Specs.
Shop Specs!
With all your favorites on tap, you'll bring home the win. Boots on, drinks up. The fun starts here.
Shop Specs!
Oh, yeah. Get stocked up at Specs before kickoff. All right, Jason, let's grab some questions you got this week and get some of your thoughts. If Texas somehow misses on Kavian Bryant, what quarterback would they pivot to?
Yeah, Kavian Bryant, the talented quarterback out of Palestine. There's been a lot of Texas Tech chatter that they're going to try to make that one interesting. So, if they miss, what quarterback would they pivot to? There's some options, but quarterback recruiting in this 2027 cycle is a little bit behind schedule where we've seen in previous years. Usually those guys are already starting to commit in the summer. Well, we haven't really seen that much. So, they've got a couple options. We've talked about Peyton Houston a lot on this show, right?
Mm-hmm.
Young guy out of Shreveport. He's still an option. I mean, USC is in play there. Garrett Nussmeier Colton Nussmeier, excuse me, Garrett Nussmeier's younger brother, although most people seem to think he'll probably follow his brother's footsteps and go to LSU. Gunnar Rivers is a guy that Texas has recruited. He's been in Austin. Let me get this right. Waxahachie. Jerry Meyer is a really talented quarterback, transferred into Waxahachie, and people think he's going to be really, really good. He was invited to the Texas Elite Camp. So they've got some other irons in the fire and evaluations, but right now the only true offers are Kavian Bryant and Peyton Houston. They have another guy who's committed actually to Ohio State. But I think what you'll see there is we'll see Texas just continue to evaluate guys. And listen, you're going to sign Diabell. It might be hard to get an elite, kind of like following up with Arch Manning. It's going to be hard to find an elite quarterback that's going to want to follow Diabell. So you might have to go, say a lower level, but just a Jerry Meyer, who's a really good player, but you might have to find someone who just wants to be a Texas Longhorn and trust your evaluation for that quarterback in that 2027 cycle. But, those dominoes have not begun to fall, so it's hard to predict for sure.
Yeah, Jason, you just don't need to bury that lead. If just there's a guy in Waxahachie, that's all you have to say. That's the big story. And nice job on pronunciation, by the way. See,
you corrected me enough. I think I've finally got it in my brain now.
You're a good student. Jeff Ketchum is not. I cannot get Jeff Ketchum to say Lancaster to save my life, but you have learned Waxahachie very well. So I appreciate that. And Waxahachie is throwing some talent out there here and there with certain positions. Let's get to this second one, Jason. An interesting question here. Which specific recruit do you predict will have the highest ceiling or is the biggest steal for the 26 class, and why? Good question.
Yeah, to me, those are almost two different questions, right? Because who has the highest ceiling? You could say Diabell, obviously, but highest ceiling, man. I'm going with Richie Wesley, the defensive end / edge. I mean, I am just a huge fan of that guy. You've heard me talk about him on the show. Reclassified. He's going to barely be 17 when he enrolls at Texas in January. That guy will have just turned 17, but I think that guy has got big time NFL upside. So highest ceiling, I'm actually going Richie Wesley. Biggest steal, because you can't really call Richie Wesley a steal. He's a 5-star player, even though I think he's underrated as a 5-star player. I mean, he's not number 19 nationally. I can make a case he could be top 10 or top 5 nationally. But biggest steal, I went with Dylan Berryman. The defensive tackle that Texas has committed out of Louisiana, doesn't have the biggest recruiting profile, isn't the most highly ranked guy, but dude, if you see him in person, Chad, I mean, he is built like a tank, man, just barrel chested. And then you put on the film and he plays like a tank. I mean, he's just bullying guys in the backfield. So I kind of compare him to a Roy Miller, the former Texas defensive lineman, in his body style and the way he plays. So I think Texas, if I'm saying biggest steal, I went with Dylan Berryman as my the guy that might be a little bit underranked. It might be a surprise steal for this class.
Yeah, I hope all the older folks, fans, appreciated that Roy Miller comment, because as soon as I read it, I thought, oh, that tells me exactly what I need to know. Like that body style, Roy Miller just was that incredibly just thick, immovable force in the middle. It was a great comp. All right. Thank you for that question. One more, Jason, before we wrap it up. Have you heard anything on five-star Ohio State commit Chris Henry Jr.? SI article is saying we are trying to flip. So, Jason, it's a normal name, but is this the son of the Chris Henry, or is this a different family?
It is the son of the late Chris Henry. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
He's a wide receiver. He's been committed to Ohio State for 2 years, and they played on television. He's at Modern Day. They played on television last week, and he mentioned, I think in the post game or something like, "Oh, Texas is one of the schools still talking." And well, here's the deal, man. I mean, like Adam Gorney with Rivals has been saying for 2 years, as long as he's been committed, hey, Texas is still talking to him. But I don't think there's any reason to be focused on this story. I mean, he's a great player. Texas, is going to stay in touch in case something crazy happens with Ohio State. But, everything I've heard, everything he said is he's completely locked in with Ohio State. Like I said, he's been with them committed to them for 2 years, barring crazy coaching changes or anything like that. I don't think there'll be any excitement there with Texas and Chris Henry, but like we talked about earlier, right? You still keep the lines in the water on these guys in case something crazy happens, and you want to have kept in touch with them in case an opportunity opens up.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on that young man's story either way, wherever he ends up. Obviously, a very unique journey for Chris Henry Jr. Such a tragic story with his dad. What a beast his dad was as a receiver. My goodness. And I'm assuming the apple didn't fall far from the tree with Chris Henry Jr., man. His dad was a blast to watch. I'm sure he will be too. There are the questions that roll in. Jason takes questions each and every week. There's a Q&A section a lot of times in the 3-2-1. There certainly is this week. Go check out the other questions. We can't hit the whole article because Jason's got a lot of good stuff in there for you. So go to orangebloods.com, hit that QR code, get signed up, make it your gift to yourself right before we get this historic matchup with Texas and Ohio State to begin the season. It is going to be incredible. All right, Jason, anything else we need to hit before we wrap up this week?
No, man, I'm just ready for this weekend. It's gonna be. I'd say obviously the Texas Ohio State game is what we're focused on, but it's gonna be a fun weekend of watching football, dude. Like, I don't think my wife and kids are going to see me much this weekend because all weekend is just
the 3 top 10s, man. It's just so cool that we get 3 in one weekend. What you'll learn from Texas and Ohio State, what you learn from the Tiger battle at Clemson, and then what you'll learn in South Beach with Carson Beck against the guy Notre Dame just picked as their quarterback. And like those 6 teams all matter. And then how they come out of the weekend, because we won't forget about any of them. They all could. I mean, they could all be playoff teams, right? And they're going to play each other this weekend, and we get to figure out kind of what it is. So
my sister-in-law is flying in from out of state for Labor Day to see my wife and their mother and me and the kids, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'll be seeing her a whole lot this weekend.
No, because not a whole lot. Texas Saturday morning. The LSU Clemson game is Saturday evening, and Notre Dame Miami is Sunday evening.
Maybe I can meet her for breakfast on Sunday, but that's probably about all she's getting out of me this weekend. So.
That's what I'm doing, Jason. We're getting to see our daughter for the first time since she went to college, and I'm squeezing it into Sunday brunch because of all the football. Hey, sad but true. It's sad.
It's the story of our lives, right? Yeah.
It's a tough life we lead. Thank you all for liking, subscribing, and getting the notifications. Thank you for getting that subscriber number climbing like it has been. We appreciate you. Remember, subscribing to the YouTube channel. It's absolutely free, and it does help us out. So thank you all for adding subscribers. Tell those that you know that haven't subscribed to jump on in. Thanks again to John and his crew at Longhorn Wealth Management Group. Check them out, 972-707-4900 or longhornwealth.net. Until next week, y'all have a good one. Next week, we'll have an actual game to react to a little bit. Best of luck to Texas against Ohio State. Y'all enjoy it. Come see us at TCH Social Austin over on 183 for the watch parties again if you're looking for a place to check out the game. Until next week, y'all take care. See ya.